my pleasure to introduce Dr. Thomas Cummings. And as you can see on your screens, um, Dr. Cummings uh, got his education from Rutgers and his residency and fellowship Duke University, where he ascended. And you can see him in a picture um, where he is smiling here, very happy to be a fellow, I guess. And he has he's really a very prominent member of several societies. Among them, the Virchow Zimmermann Society, and you can see here a picture where you see him next to Dr. Shields, who recently passed away, and other colleagues of the Ophthalmic Pathology Society. Dr. Cummings is professor of pathology and ophthalmology, and he's the program director of the residency program of pathologists over there. And he's also a neuropathologist. He has published many chapters in books and more than 100 peer-reviewed publications. He's really a scholar in the sense that he's also an excellent historian, and he's very good at history of pathology and history in general and ophthalmology. So we're in for a treat. Thank you for coming and giving us this lecture, Dr. Cummings. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And just a reminder, mute your microphones.
Okay, you can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Barrios, for that kind introduction and for the invitation to be here today. Thank you, Dr. Aubrey, also for everything you've done to welcome me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope to see you all one day in person, maybe at USCAP or something fun like that. I've given this talk many times. I think it really goes well better like in-person interactive. But I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about some history today and the role that pathologists actually played in this, really what I think is one of the most infamous days in the history of the United States. If you saw my title and said, what on earth is this guy talking about? And you had to Google it, you probably now know what we will be talking about. So let's get rolling. So on November 22nd, 1963, an event happened, and it has generated more than 6 million government documents, thousands of books, articles, movies, and documentaries. If you've been following the news lately, it's been all over President Biden and Trump, their conferences, X, formerly known as Twitter, the New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, CNN, wherever you get your news, you're probably aware of this story. It's been published in leading medical journals and textbooks. And why I'd like to share it with you today is whether or not this is a controversy or a conspiracy, right? A conspiracy is simply depending on whether it's a fact or not a fact. And whatever it is, believed by more than 60% of the United States public. So I think it's always a timely topic. It also, I believe, is of interest to pathologists, especially those interested in autopsy and forensic pathology, and I believe to this society, because the history of this event continues to thrive today after 61 years, 11 months, 1 day, and counting. What happened on November 22nd, 1963, Friday at 1 o'clock in Dallas, Texas? Of course, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated. I specifically said his middle name is Fitzgerald. I'll get to that a bit later. Okay, here's a New York Times headline from Saturday. Kennedy is killed by a sniper as he rides in a car in Dallas. Lyndon Baines Johnson was sworn in on the plane. And that's what happened that day in Dallas, Texas. So I would like to go about this talk in two parts. Number one, we'll talk about the history and the public interest, the controversy and the conspiracy question mark theories, a little bit about forensic and autopsy pathology, specifically gunshot wounds. A lot of the controversy stems from were the president's wounds an exit wound or an entrance wound. And part two, if we have time at the end, maybe just a few minutes, you might be wondering, why is this guy so interested in this story? And I think I do have a personal connection that I've been involved in for my entire life, essentially. And I will let you know a little bit about that. So like I said, we've got 6 million documents. I'm just cherry picking and hitting the high points in the next 45 minutes or so. You can go down a rabbit hole on all of this information. And I hope you find it a little bit educational and interesting. Finally, I've given this talk multiple times, grand rounds here at Duke, different departments, a few other places. And like I teach my residents, I say every case that you get, you really have to think and consider, what if this case is your patient and your autopsy report? Imagine being the pathologist who did the autopsy on President Kennedy. We're going to talk about it, okay? And then imagine that your report, what you say and how you wrote it and how it's interpreted, is analyzed, critiqued, and discussed 61 years later. If you're not familiar with www.archives.government, this is our US government national archives. You can just Google it and go there, and you can spend every minute for the next 20 years reading about the John F. Kennedy assassination records. This is the homepage. This was an executive order that was signed by President Trump on January 23rd, 2025. And you will find 6 million pages of records, photographs, motion pictures, sound recordings, and artifacts, and just about anything you want related not only to President Kennedy, but also his brother, of course, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968, and of course, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who was also part of that kind of trio of assassinations that really defined the 1960s, a time in American history and culture when things were changing rapidly. Okay, if you go to the archives.gov, you can also navigate down to the reports section and you can find the autopsy report. And if you click on that, you will find the official copy of the president's autopsy report. And I have a few things highlighted here that says Dr. Malcolm Perry was a physician in the Parkland Hospital in Dallas who examined and attended the president. And he made some comments about the death. Specifically, there was a massive wound of the head and a second much smaller wound of the low anterior neck in approximately the midline. A simple statement, true statement, can cause a lot of controversy. Okay, a few sentences down, we see the sentence, the remains were transported via the presidential plane to Washington, D.C., and subsequently to the Naval Medical School, National Naval Medical Center, Bethesda, Maryland, for post-mortem examination. Conspiracy theorists love to focus on these things. They think the state of Texas should have had jurisdiction to examine the president. Federal guidelines say that federal guidelines should overrule it. So we have all of these problems that seemingly are in the news today, back many years and back to probably to the beginning of this great experimentation of democracy in the United States. Okay, here is the autopsy report signed by Doctors Humes, Boswell, and Fink, all pathologists, just like you and I, okay, you and me rather. And you see up at the top, it says, the deceased died as a result of person or persons unknown. Again, this opens just a rabbit hole for anyone who wants to focus on these few words. These pathologists made the statement that that missile wound that I just mentioned, the smaller one in the anterior midline, made its exit. They clearly called it an exit wound. Okay? If you go to the Journal of the American Medical Association, you can read all these papers. If you're interested in this, they're really fascinating papers. The plain truth from the MDs, the pathologists, Dr. Humes and Boswell, who did the autopsy. And there's some nice photographs of Drs. Humes and Boswell and Fink. And Dr. Humes here is quoted, "This was the least secret autopsy in the world, and the cause of death was blatantly obvious. There is no doubt from whence cometh those bullets, from rear to front, from a high velocity rifle." The gentleman in the middle is Dr. Lundberg. He was the editor of JAMA, and he was interested in the story and all the press and controversy, as you could imagine, that it caused. And he, quote, completely believed the autopsy report that Kennedy was killed by only 2 bullets that struck him from above and behind and caused fatal high-velocity wounds. This was on the New York Times, May 20th, 1992. Drs. Humes and Boswell, front page story, affirming the Kennedy autopsy report. You see the big blue star there is, they at this time had to come out and criticize another doctor who attended to President Kennedy, who wrote a book asserting a conspiracy to cover up evidence that the president was shot from the front, not the back. So this is a big problem. Is the president shot from the back? Okay, that's what we're saying. Others are leaving the door open that he was shot also from the front, and therefore there's another shooter, and the conspiracy is off the rails. You can read all of this in JAMA. If you just want to do a PubMed search, you'll find all the articles. Very easy. The Warren Commission. At the time, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was Chief Justice Earl Warren, and he decided to name a 7-man panel to investigate the assassination. The Chief Justice headed it, and you see the individuals on the panel. The middle panel at the bottom is Allen Dulles. We've all probably flown to Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. Dulles was the chief of the CIA at the time. That also has been a sense of controversy over the years. Also, you may notice Representative Gerald Ford, soon to be President Ford, right next to Dulles, and all the others, Hale Boggs, John Cooper, and Richard Russell. So the commission met. They met for a few months, up to a year maybe. And the statement was, Chief Justice Warren believed Oswald acted alone. And he wrote, quote, "The facts of the assassination itself are simple. So simple that many people believe it must be more complicated and conspiratorial to be true." I think sometimes as pathologists, we get into these situations, we see a case, we think it can't be this easy, there's got to be another hook or another trick, and we can go down these rabbit holes. The New York Times published, the Warren Commission finds Oswald guilty. They say that the assassin, meaning Lee Harvey Oswald, and Ruby, who then killed Oswald, both acted alone. They rebuked the Secret Service. The official Warren Commission, you could go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever you like to buy stuff, and you can buy the book with the official Warren Commission. I believe I mentioned at the beginning, I have no financial disclosures. I have no political statements to make. I'm just trying to talk about here some history and some pathology. So based on what I've told you, it sounds like an open and shut case, right? Like Dr. Barrios gets a small cell carcinoma of the lung, he signs it out, it's open and shut. However, what's going on? In October 2017, Washington Post published this poll believing that greater than 60% of Americans believed in a conspiracy and that more than one person was responsible for the Kennedy assassination. Interestingly, Hillary Clinton voters and Donald J. Trump voters agreed on this almost unanimously. Okay? And every demographic, men, women, all races and ages, Democrats and Republicans, and everything in between, believed in a conspiracy that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone in the JFK assassination. So clearly we're off the rails here with the possibility of a conspiracy. Now, what do we take from the autopsy? Like I said, who had jurisdiction? Is there one shooter or multiple shooters? Let's talk about the forensics of the gunshot wounds. The president, we all know, suffered a severe, fatal bullet to the back of the head. But how about the bullet in the midline anterior neck? Is it an exit wound? Is it an entrance wound? And if you're familiar with the case, there's a so-called magic bullet theory, that one bullet was able to go through the president, hit Governor Connolly of Texas sitting in front of him in the front row of the limousine, and then take a right turn into his thigh and exit through the radius of his left wrist. The so-called magic bullet theory. Okay, and you can see the pathology report very well. So now things are brewing, and the United States House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassination was established in 1976 to investigate the assassinations of President Kennedy and Dr. King. This panel consisted of 8 chief medical examiners in major local jurisdictions. They had an experience with doing more than 100,000 autopsies, and they came together to determine the cause of the president's death and the nature and locations of his wounds. What did they report? They concluded the Warren Commission report that, according to Chief Justice Warren, was so simple that it could not be anything else. This forensic pathology panel concluded that the report is seriously flawed and that, quote, there is a high probability that 2 gunmen fired at the president and that a conspiracy was probable. When millions of people are reading this, you can see how we easily get into a conspiracy. Now, go to the National Archives and you can find these statements. The big red arrow on the left, the top arrow. The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The committee was unable to identify the other gunmen or the extent of the conspiracy. Go down a few lines. The committee believes, on the basis of the circumstantial evidence available to it, that there is a likelihood that James Earl Ray assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a result of a conspiracy. Now, I'm just cherry picking these things. We only have 45 minutes, right? But you can see how it's easy to cherry pick what you want to hear and read and believe. Now, let's fast forward to 1992. The Assassination Records Review Board was a law passed by Congress to expedite the disclosure of records relevant to the assassination. And they concluded one of the many tragedies of the assassination of President Kennedy has been the incompleteness of the autopsy report and the suspicion caused by the shroud of secrecy that has surrounded the records that do exist. If you've been following the news, if you're on social media, you know what I'm talking about. President Trump. This is October 21st, 2017. Trump loves to go on Twitter or X. Subject to the receipt of further information, I will be allowing the long blocked and classified JFK files to be opened. This was retweeted 40,000 times, 40,000 people liked it, 110,000, whatever. Okay? Then, of course, it gets on CNN. Says he will release these classified files. And then he delayed it. Trump bows to national security concerns. It further stirs the pot. If you were following the first term of President Trump, you know he was very much into these conspiracy theories, the grassy knoll, the umbrella man, LBJ, and for those of you in Texas, Senator Ted Cruz's dad. Trump accused Ted Cruz's father of associating with the Kennedy assassin. Okay. Then Trump came and gone, and here comes President Biden in 2021. Biden said he was going to release the records, and then he blamed the COVID-19 pandemic and said he couldn't do it. That caused a lot of, as you can imagine, why would the COVID pandemic blame him from releasing all these assassination records? All right, back in the news. Biden released 1,000 secret files. A lot of people said he didn't go far enough. There was still a lot of redacted material. And then Newsweek got a hold of the story in 2022, and they shed light on the CIA's connection to Oswald. Remember, Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA at this time. Okay, if you know this guy, Rob Reiner, he's an actor, a filmmaker, an activist. He's making a new movie recently. He had a podcast out 2 years ago. If you're into podcasts, I listen to it. It's fascinating stuff. It's called Who Killed JFK? He says he takes a new look at it, and he teamed up with journalist Soledad O'Brien, who's also been on national news. They called it America's Greatest Murder Mystery. Okay, if you're from New York City, you know all about the New York Post, and they apparently got their hands on some new video and some new filings that prove that there was a grassy knoll conspiracy. The grassy knoll, when the president's limousine was driving down Oak Street in Dallas, and the shooter was in the Texas Book Depository on the 6th floor, as the limousine was driving away, you can see this little grassy knoll, and then fence there, and there are train tracks. There's a train that goes behind that fence. There are a lot of conspiracies that people were shooting him from the train, or they jumped the fence and got on the train. You can see how this can really quickly get very fast and furious. All right, last year, June, about 1 year ago, Trump promised to release the JFK and the Epstein documents. He went on Fox News. They had a big talk about it, and then he put it on his Truth social media that it's time for American people to know the capitalized truth. All right. You see down at the bottom, our current Secretary of Health, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he quote, "It's very disturbing that Biden refused to release more of the documents." All right, just this January, Trump again is out there in the Washington Post saying he'll declassify it. And he did, okay? But again, not everything. And when he made that announcement, Trump draws some of the loudest applause of the night. And you can find all of this stuff on social media. He signed the orders, and on and on and on. Here you can see up at the top, Elon Musk even got involved. He tweeted out awesome with a smiley face with sunglasses on. So everybody's into this. Okay. And then on March 18th, thousands of secret files were released, and they appear to shed light on CNA methods all over the news. ABC News, World News Tonight. Okay. We've got to take a break from it. Let's go back to what we do as pathologists. We all have some forensics training. Part of my residency was being the forensic pathologist on call at Duke during my residency and fellowship for anything that happened within the Duke footprint. So let's see if we can get anywhere. Let's talk about Oswald, the weapon, the magic question mark bullet, entrance wounds and exit wounds, the surgeons that attended to the president the night he was the day he was assassinated. They made drawings and sketches and gave testimony. How does that hold up? We have forensic pathology experts. They are big names. You undoubtedly know them. We'll see this in a few minutes. Okay, what about Lee Harvey Oswald? We could spend a day just talking about him and his life and what he, he was a former U.S. Marine. He left the Marines. By all reports, he was not a skilled shooter. Apparently, expert shooters have tried to reproduce the shot that Oswald did and were unable to make it based on the location, the gun he had, the conditions at the time, the speed the president's vehicle was driving down that road, and so on and so forth. What else did Oswald do that stirred the controversy? Well, when he was in police custody and just before he was killed by Jack Ruby, Oswald's quote is, "I didn't shoot anybody. No, sir, I'm just a patsy." Okay, we all know what a patsy is. It's somebody who is a scapegoat or takes the fall for somebody else. And if you really think about it, if you're going to assassinate the president or somebody famous, you do it out of megalomania, right? You want the fame, you want the notoriety. Nobody would do this and say, nope, not me, I'm just a patsy. So a lot of these things just kind of don't make a lot of good sense. Okay, you could go to the National Archives and you can see photographs of the Mannlicher Carano rifle that was owned by Oswald and allegedly shot the president. We can talk about the bullet. Here's a photograph of the bullet. Looks like a brand new, pristine bullet. Okay, and here's the magic bullet theory, that the assassin shot Kennedy. The bullet then went through his shoulder, through his back, then through his neck, through his necktie, at his armpit, into Senator Connally, shattered his rib, shattered his left thigh, and then ended up in his right wrist. We call this the remarkable path of the pristine bullet, according to the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission said the physics are perfect. It's okay that the bullet had no deformities or anything on it, and that a bullet could go through 15 layers of clothing, 7 layers of skin, 15 inches of tissue, hit a necktie, remove 4 inches of ribs, shatter a radius bone, and come out looking brand new. This was the chief consultant in wound ballistics from the US Army who supervised the tests. And this consultant's quote was, "Under no circumstances do I feel that this bullet could hit a wrist and still not be deformed. We proved that by experiments." Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our current Secretary of Health. He just got on social media recently. "The magic bullet theory is now dead. It's preposterous that this has been the mainstay of the theory that a single shooter murdered President Kennedy since the Warren Commission advanced it 60 years ago under the direction of CIA Director Allen Dulles, whom my uncle, right, his uncle was Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan at the Democratic Convention in 1968. All right, Kennedy again, you can read all this. This is all common news. Kennedy got on a New York City radio station, WABC 770, and quote, "There is overwhelming evidence that the CIA was involved in his murder. I think it is beyond a reasonable doubt at this point." Now, interestingly, Robert F. Kennedy, JFK's younger brother, he, at the time his brother was murdered, he believed in a conspiracy. This is in the Boston Globe, 2013. Okay? In September of 2023, you might have seen this on the news recently, the Secret Service agent who was riding on the vehicle alongside the president after being silent for 59 years, he decided to go public with what he thinks he knows. It's a fascinating article. You can find it in the New York Times. You could probably find it. He was all over CNN. This is Mr. Paul Landis. He was the Secret Service agent who witnessed the assassination. He wants to raise some new questions. He destroys the magic bullet theory. Okay? Despite the government concluding that JFK was hit with a magic bullet. So now we have to say, is the magic bullet real or is it not real? And where's the truth? Fox News, who really killed JFK? You can see how this stuff will never go away at this point. Okay, so Dr. Robert McClellan was the surgeon who was in the emergency room when the president was brought in. And here's his quote. "I was about 18 inches above that wound. I got a better look at it than anyone else in the room. It was way back in the back of the head, which led to the thought that he was shot not only from the back, but also from the front. In other words, there was more than one gunman and therefore a conspiracy of some sort. And I looked into that wound for a long period of time and there was no doubt about what I saw. And here's his sketch. And you can see underlined 6mm entrance wound low in the neck, which I saw clearly. Probable exit wound in the back of the neck." Dr. Perry, Dr. Malcolm Perry, was a general surgeon. He did the tracheostomy over the president while they were trying to resuscitate him in the emergency room. And if you follow the timeline of what Dr. Perry reported, it's pretty interesting. At the time of the first news conference, it was a wound of entrance. Dr. Perry said Secret Service agent Elmer Moore threatened him and coerced him to say it is an exit wound. Then the Warren Commission reported it was an exit wound. In 1977, he quotes, "To me, privately, unquestionably, it was a wound of entrance." And on and on and on. And then he flip-flopped again in 1992 in the JAMA piece, and he said it was an exit wound, and he agreed with all the autopsy reports. Okay. This is a nice piece from Archives of Pathology and Lab Medicine. Just a good old-fashioned review of the practical pathology of gunshot wounds. And the conclusion, of course, is that pathologists must be aware of the implications, requirements, and pitfalls in interpretation of the injuries so that the examination fulfills its expectations to the community and the justice system. Here are some photos. I think these are pretty standard entrance wounds on the left. Nice, typical round defects with a marginal rim of abrasion. And then, of course, the stellate, more destroyed exit type wounds on the right. However, we all know that our profession, our job, what we do on a day-to-day basis is not so straightforward and cut and dry. And I mean, here I've got underlined, the quote is, "An exit wound can closely resemble an entrance wound and may occasionally challenge even an experienced forensic pathologist, let alone surgeons, emergency room doctors, residence fellows, those of us who don't have a lot of experience. If it can fool the experts, it can certainly fool us." Dr. Spitz, huge name of course, in forensic pathology. And you can go to his textbook. This was a book I read in residency and I still consult today. And, he's on board that this shot to his neck was an exit wound. Okay. He says, "In reality, both bullets struck from the rear, hitting the back of the right shoulder and the head." And he gives a very nice description of his findings. Okay, Dr. Cyril Wecht, another prominent name in forensic pathology. And he's been pretty vocal about his thoughts on this matter. He says the investigation is far from over. Dr. Wecht has a really amazing dossier here about being a medical legal consultant, and he has discussed and investigated the assassinations of President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, Elvis Presley, the O.J. Simpson case, John Benet Ramsey case, and many others. 1972, Dr. Wecht reviewed the autopsy. Okay, he was given permission. He concluded that the materials in the National Archives that we've been talking about were authentic, although some things seem to be missing. And down at the bottom, you see Dr. Wecht doubted that one gunman firing from the 6th floor of
Hello.
Hi, Ashley, how are you?
Okay, how are you?
And Dr. Wecht doubted that one gunman inflicted the wounds or that a single bullet could have caused both the president and the governor's wounds. Dr. Wecht also comments, quote, "The Warren Commission report is sheer nonsense, and this was a conspiracy involving the overthrow of the government, the killing of the president. Anywhere else in the world, it's called a coup d'etat." There's been acoustic ballistic evidence on the acoustics of the ballistics published in Science. And this, again, goes back to not supporting the conclusion that a second gunman was involved in the assassination. So we got people lining up on both sides here. Okay. Conspiracy, Forensic Science, and Common Sense, a very nice piece, again, in JAMA in 1993. If you go into the neurosurgery literature, there's some really nicely written papers. Dr. Grossman was the chair of neurosurgery down at Baylor, and I believe Methodist maybe. He passed away recently, but he examined the president and also had his own viewpoint on the events of that day. And again, if you just PubMed John F. Kennedy assassination and neuroforensics, and you'll find all these articles. And if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, just go to Wikipedia and type in JFK assassination, and you can spend days, months, if not years or decades, going through all the writing about it. There's also a lot of stuff just out there in the movies and on the news. I've seen all of these and watched them. If you're a Stephen King fan, this book, 11/22/63, is a book about time travel and how time travel could have altered the events of history. If you like reading Stephen King, I think you'd like it. It comes in at about 900 pages. It's like reading a David Foster Wallace book. But anyway, movie Jackie, Kevin Costner, the Oliver Stone movie put out JFK. This really revitalized all of this stuff back in the 90s. And I have a book here by Doris Kearns Goodwin. She, of course, is a well-known historian. And I put that book in there because I'm going to talk about something in there a bit later. Okay, you can listen to all this on National Public Radio. And the headline is, Inconsistencies Haunt the Official Record of Kennedy's Death. Again, the president's brother saw the conspiracy. Oliver Stone revisited it recently, just a few years ago, with a new documentary. Fascinating stuff. If you're into this kind of stuff, you watch it, it really can get you thinking. Okay? This was the movie, the JFK movie that Kevin Costner was the main actor in. And then ABC World News put out the top 5 conspiracy theories. You know, those top 5, of course, include the Soviets, the Mafia, the Cubans. Why the Cubans? Well, you remember your history, right? Back in this time in the 60s, there was this Bay of Pigs incident where the US was trying to overthrow the Castro regime, and the Bay of Pigs overthrow surprise attack did not go well, and the Cubans were waiting there, and they neutralized the attack, and then things did not get any better from there. President Lyndon Johnson, he's been implicated in being in on the conspiracy. Apparently he had some good reasons, some ambition to be motivated by the CIA to go along with this. And finally, the CIA. So you can read all about the different conspiracies that are out there and the theories behind it, and you can look at it, you can think about it on your own, rebut it, or go with it. All right, how are we doing on time? Pretty good? All right, so I hope that was a nice overview of the Kennedy assassination. We could spend 8 hours or more just talking about it. And finally, I'll end with, you may or may not be wondering, why am I so interested in this that I would put all the time to make this lecture that I've been giving now for about 5 years. And I'll tell you why if you're interested. So I want you to just think about one person right now. Think of your mother or beautiful moms, and think of your mom's dad. Do you see him? Everybody see him? This is mine. This is John Frederick Ruck, handsome, young-looking man back in the 1920s. This photograph taken in Boston, where he was born and raised, and looks like he's about to conquer the world. So here's what happened. My maternal great-grandparents, Mary Waters and Otto von Ruck, they met in the on the outskirts of Boston in Dorchester and Roxbury, you know, these little hamlet enclaves in the city. And they got married, and then my grandpa, my mom's dad, is born. Now, my great-grandmother, Mary, was not really in the picture. And my grandpa's dad, Otto, died of a spinal paralysis in 1912. So he was essentially orphaned at a young age. And I know all this because I essentially lived with and was raised by my grandfather growing up. So these stories have been with me and passed down all the time for many years. This is my great-grandpa's death certificate from the city of Boston. You can see he lived at 6th Regent Court in Roxbury. He died of spinal paralysis. And his parents here on the left, his father Joseph was born in Boston, and his mom Elizabeth Valpel came from Germany. Now, where am I going with this? At the time that my grandpa is growing up in Boston, John F. Honey Fitz Fitzgerald was the Democratic congressman and mayor of Boston. He was nicknamed Honey Fitz because he had a lot of charm and charisma. He was born in Dorchester. My grandparents are in Dorchester and Roxbury. So it kind of makes sense that you might get to know people. Honey Fitz had 6 children. His oldest daughter, Rose, eventually becomes Rose Kennedy, President Kennedy's mom. Okay? And Rose's younger brother, Freddie Fitzgerald, becomes best friends with my grandfather somehow. I know, I can't believe it either, but it's true. Okay? So Rose married Joe Kennedy. And Joe Kennedy's dad, Patrick, was Honey Fitz's political rival. So if you're into this kind of stuff, I mean, I eat this stuff up. The Gilded Age, all the stuff that's been on TV lately, the history of New York City and how all these mega families, the Vanderbilts and the Kennedys, and how all these people formed alliances and got together. It's a fascinating part of our U.S. history. Okay? Now, Joseph and Rose Kennedy had 9 children. President Kennedy, Bobby, okay, and Senator Ted Kennedy. You know, Senator Ted Kennedy was the liberal lion from Massachusetts. And here they are, JFK, Bobby, and Ted. And there's President Kennedy with his mom, Rose. So remember, Rose, her younger brother, Freddie, somehow they meet in the Boston Theater District, and soon they become best friends. And if you would have gotten to know my grandfather, he was the life of the party kind of guy. Now, apparently, my grandfather and Freddie were golfing one day and had a few beverages maybe, and they got into one of the original old jalopies, and there was an accident. And a pedestrian was severely injured and paralyzed. Now, being involved with a family like the Kennedys, the matter was settled, and that was that. No one was arrested. The legal affairs were settled. But Rose Kennedy made her younger brother, Freddie, and my grandfather, made them promise they would never drive a vehicle again. Freddie died a young man. He had some problems. And my grandfather, he was able to move on. He left Boston. He moved to New York City. He met my mom's mom, my grandmother, who had just come over the boat from Naples, Italy, and settled with her family in Greenwich Village in Little Italy. Somehow she met my grandfather in New York City. They moved to Brooklyn. My mom is born, and I'm born, and that's basically how I'm standing here today. My grandfather was like my best friend growing up. He never drove a car his entire life. Every time we went something, and this was where living in Brooklyn growing up, we either walked, we took the subway, we took the ferry, or something. Okay? Now, my grandfather wanted to prove he could get a driver's license. And he went with my mom's brother. My mom's brother, Johnny, took my grandfather to the Department of Motor Vehicles in 1960s. He passed the test. They gave him his driver's license. He walked out of the building and he ripped up the license and he said, I solemnly swore to Rose Kennedy that I would never drive again. I can't do it and I won't do it. So what is this is like my 4th degree of separation. My grandfather's best friend, his sister, is JFK's mother. How does it get more kind of unbelievable to me? You may remember Senator Kennedy passed away now, about 15 years in 2009? He had brain cancer. In fact, he had a glioblastoma. He was operated at Duke. I was a neuropathologist. I met with all the people I had to meet with to do the frozen section. I walked into the room, I gave the diagnosis, I signed off on the case, and I signed out that pathology report. By the way, the alias that the senator came into the hospital with is spectacular. I won't reveal it. It's just one of my little secrets. The Kennedy family keeps getting more interesting. Bobby recently said a worm got into his brain and ate a portion of it. And I'll leave it at that. Now, again, I have nothing to gain or disclose or anything. But if you do go to Dallas, you can go to the Texas School Book Depository. There's a museum on the 6th floor, and you can actually stand where Oswald assassinated the president. And there's a big museum, and as you enter the museum down on the street, here on the grassy knoll, you'll see many conspiracy theorists holding up banners and signs and passing out paraphernalia. Maybe perhaps some of you that are with us today have done this. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there. And let's fast forward to 2025. Let's imagine if this case did go to a jury. And let's say you've got the Warren Commission on one side and Oswald's defense team on the other side. The Warren Commission claims there was one shooter, there was a magic bullet, there was no conspiracy. This is kind of Occam's razor, right? It's so simple, there's only one explanation. The president is in his limousine, this guy goes to the 6th floor, he's got a rifle, he shoots him, the president dies, and that's it. And they say they've got autopsy, ballistics, and forensics evidence to prove it. Now, imagine you're the defense attorney defending Lee Harvey Oswald. Your defense is, there's more than one shooter, we've got evidence. There's no magic bullet. There's clearly a conspiracy. This is so-called Hickham's dictum, where nothing is so simple and there are many reasons that something can happen. And we've got our own evidence based on the autopsy, ballistics, and forensics. It would be fascinating to me to see how this case would be tried in a court of law, with all the experts on both sides. Back in 1963, we have one man, Abraham Zapruder. You may have heard of him. He was the one man holding his camera. He was down there. He was excited to see the president drive by. He had his old-time recording camera, and he got it on tape. Magically, the important what do you call them? The things in the reel have disappeared. Now, imagine if the president was driving down, well, number one, he wouldn't be in an open vehicle, right? He'd be, of course, in a bulletproof vehicle. The Beast, is that what they call it now, that the president rides in? And there'd be probably 15 if you've ever been in DC when the motorcade goes by. It's a spectacular sight. 20 bulletproof SUVs. And of course, you don't know which one the president's in. You don't know which one the vice president's in. And imagine now with everybody with a cell phone and doing this annoying thing of holding up their phone all the time. But you can imagine what this story would do today. It would be almost impossible to get your grip around it. So it is 4:52. I think that leaves a few minutes left over. Again, I thank you for joining me on this journey. Millions and millions of documents crushed into 45 minutes. And thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cummings. Excellent, fantastic conference, and raises many questions. I'm sure that a lot of people have some questions. So I will open the meeting to questions if somebody wants to ask.
Dr. Cummings, this is Max Booyer. I'm a pathologist in Houston and formerly in Dallas. It was a fantastic presentation you gave, but I was close to Dr. Stembridge, who's the chair of pathology at Southwestern. And one of the outcomes of the assassination controversy was to greatly improve the medical examiner system in Texas. But one of the issues that I was told by Dr. Stembridge and others was that really there were two autopsies. There was the first autopsy done or started at Parkland, and then the body went to the National Naval Medicine Center, where the federal pathologists were involved in the case, and that they did not know that one of the wounds was at the same site that the tracheostomy was performed.
Yep.
So that gave impetus for a lot of the initial confusion and different interpretations in the Dallas autopsy versus the Bethesda autopsy. And I wonder what your investigations and thoughts about that may be.
Thank you for contributing that. You're right. People really like to focus on who had jurisdiction of the body and why was the autopsy began in Parkland. You know, they say they rushed him onto the plane and the plane took off and Mrs. Kennedy still had the blood dripping down from her attire. You're right. I mean, that tracheostomy, it contaminated the scene.
Right.
Right. And at this point, what we have is what people saw and wrote and contributed. I don't claim to have any good answer for anything, but it just adds to the lore of the case, I think. And
yes.
the mystique.
Any other comments or questions?
Tom, excellent lecture. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. One of the pillars of the conspiracy theorists is the involvement of Jack Ruby as a silencer. And one of the things that have been mentioned is the fact that he had terminal cancer at the time that he killed Lee Harvey Oswald. I guess two questions. One is that true? I've never seen evidence that that's actually true. And two, in your research, have you come across anything that would support that Jack Ruby was part of a larger conspiracy?
Ruby gets a lot of discussion. I believe he was a nightclub owner. He had some mafia correspondence, and it all feeds into the same narrative of did the CIA want, was Oswald a patsy and then they had to dispose of him? And Ruby, I don't know if Ruby had liver cancer maybe, but he did not survive too long after killing Oswald. So yeah, I just don't know. But that happened live on national TV.
I remember.
Tom,
From-
very
from-
nice presentation. Let me just ask you, when you compare the drawings and the report of the surgeons, the neurosurgeons, because those are the ones actually seeing the body first, I suppose, because they were trying to save him. Although from the beginning, I think they realized that that was not possible. But those are the ones that describe the wounds as fresh as possible. How does that compare with the report of the two autopsies? What is the main discrepancies?
Yeah, so I think the fatal wound that took off half of his skull, the right parietal occipital wound, I think most people agree that was a fatal wound. And then the conspiracy leads into, I think the autopsy report and the pictures support all of that. I don't think there's a lot of doubt about that. However, you watch these documentaries and they say when they're looking for the authentic photographs, they seem to have been altered or doctored, and there's no good definitive specifics for that.
The way you presented your findings, your presentation, it seems like you don't believe in the magic bullet, do you?
I'm not taking a side. It just seems, I mean, I don't know. Apparently people who know a lot about physics say that it's not magic, it's just physics, that the bullet will move in these directions based on kinetic energy and losing energy and the direction that the bullet was coming in. So I don't know the answer. It does seem unusual to me, though, that a bullet could go through all of that material, bones, and not have a single piece of evidence, anything on it. I don't know. I think this will be a great unsolved mystery. Now, of course, there are still unreleased documents. Trump may have released 95, 98% of everything, but the stuff that's redacted will probably never be released unless they just want to keep circling, letting the conspiracy go on and on.
Of note, this is Dan Curtis. Online, a portal to Texas history, there's a certificate of death for Jack Ruby, and said he died of pulmonary embolus secondary to bronchial bronchiolar carcinoma.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm thinking who had John O'Ray, who shot Dr. King. I think he had primary liver cancer.
Oh.
I'd forgotten that Ruby had lung cancer.
Not that I ever knew.
Well, if there are no more questions or comments, we just want to thank Dr. Cummings for his excellent presentation.